Hello and welcome to the program. I'm your host, Neil Howard, here on Health Professional Radio. Glad that you could join us once again. Going to talk to a guest this morning, have a brief conversation with Mr. Dan Cummings. He's joined us here on the program to talk about Peyronie's disease in his new book, Bent But Not Broken. It talks about the disease. Thank you for joining us on the program today, Don. A bit of background about yourself, if you would.
Oh, sure. Thanks for having me. This is Don Cummings. I'm a writer. I've often been a playwright, and I've written some movies and books, of course, and essays. And I contracted or came down with Peyronie's disease, and I decided it would be probably a pretty good idea to write a book about it to help other people who also come down with it. So that's my background is I have a biology degree from Tufts University. I was a pre-medical student. But then I actually became an actor, and I was an actor for many years in New York and in Hollywood. But writing sort of was always kind of running along adjacent with acting, and the writing took over. And I figured who better but me, who has been a writer for a long time, to put this story down on paper and get it out there to help other people. So that's basically my story. I live in Los Angeles. I'm from New York originally, and I kind of go back and forth quite a bit, but I'm pretty much living near Hollywood with my husband and my poodle.
Very, very busy. As most of our audience are healthcare professionals in some capacity or another, what is Peyronie's disease? For those of us who may have never heard of it or just barely familiar with it, what is Peyronie's disease?
Sure. Peyronie's disease is inflammation of tissue that ultimately causes scar tissue to invade a certain area of the penis. They believe it can happen from some sort of injury, which most people don't really have a memory of an injury, or just repeated use in a certain area. But basically, a certain part of the penis will get inflamed, and then in that area, you will get naturally occurring fibrin, which is throughout our entire bodies, which basically makes up scar tissue. And it builds up between the corpora cavernosa, which are the two erectile tubes, the two upper erectile tubes in the penis, and it sandwiches between there and the tunica albuginea, which is a reptilian-like skin that covers the outer parts of those tubes. So it sandwiches right in between those two areas. And then you don't notice it when you are flaccid, but when you become erect, the area, because there's a constriction, the scar tissue causes this constriction, and there's pain. And in the early part of the when you first sort of noticed Peyronie's disease and notice that you're contracting it, there's also some pain involved. This causes pain only during erection, but it still causes pain. And then over time, whether you are treated or not, over time the pain will go away, but the plaque can calcify. I guess many doctors and other health professionals would know that over time, if scar tissue is left alone, calcium molecules will get in there, and the plaque will become very hardened. So it's important to go after Peyronie's disease early if you get it.
Now, you mentioned early in our conversation injuries. Are we talking smashing, bending, cutting? Is there a specific type of injury? I'm assuming that not all injuries to the penis cause scar tissue, or am I incorrect in that assumption?
No. You're correct. It really depends. My doctor, for instance, thinks that this is a genetic predisposition for people who develop scar tissue more readily than others. And so it's even been noticed that if you develop Peyronie's disease, you probably have a greater chance of developing, I can never pronounce it correctly, but it's a dependrins contracture, which is where you get scar tissue at the base of usually your ring finger or your pinky, and your finger starts being pulled towards your hand because of the constriction from that scar tissue, or other scar tissue in the body. But no, you don't necessarily have to. First of all, you don't need to be injured in order to get Peyronie's disease. As I said, it can be just caused from just repeated use of your penis, maybe in a certain way. Or you could also, receive, I guess, some kind of injury, like, get bent too difficult, in a difficult manner while you're having sex with someone. And that could or could not lead to Peyronie's disease, depending on just how you are set up genetically. They don't know exactly why some people develop this scar tissue response and why other people don't, but they figure it kind of has to be a genetic component since the variation, mirrors that type of thing. That it must be genetic, like it would mirror any other kind of genetic problem in a bell curve. So.
Does a man have to be sexually active? If it happens early in life, you say you don't remember an injury, maybe playing sports, can it make intimacy impossible?
Well, it depends on how bad it gets. Like for instance, the Peyronie's disease, when it happened to me, I had a bend to the right toward the distal end, toward the head of my penis, so it went to the right. And then eventually I actually started leaning to the left and then leaned upward. So mine wasn't too bad, so I could continue to have sex. But some people, like they'll end up or begin with or end up with like a 90-degree turn. I mean, really, or even I've heard of almost like a corkscrew turn. You can actually get scar tissue in more than one location, end up with distortion in 3 different planes. So yes, it can lead to, I mean, just because of the simple shape of things, it can lead to an inability to have sex. But also there's a diminishing of erection that can happen too, because this scar tissue that starts grabbing can make it so that your corpora cavernosa cannot fully fill with blood like it used to. So yes, it can lead to profound sexual dysfunction. And the problem with Peyronie's disease is once you get it, you really don't know how far it's going to progress, and you don't know how you're going to end up at the end. That's why there ends up being a very strong psychological component, obviously, in this, because it's very distressing because you don't know where you're going to land once it either sort of calms down on its own, or if you are treated. And again, I would like to keep repeating that it's important to get treated early, because the earlier the better.
Does it eliminate, diminish sensitivity in any way, or are we just talking about a disfiguring of the shaft and other areas itself?
Oh yeah, no, the sensitivity remains the same. So you can, you can. It's the kind of thing, I guess, in a worst case scenario where if your penis is shaped such, or the pain is such that usually the pain goes away eventually. Usually after 18 months, the pain will go away because the inflammation period has calmed down. But you will still feel sensation, so you could have some kind of sex, but not necessarily be able to penetrate. So as we know, there's all other ways to have sex, or feel pleasure, So that happens to some men, and they can no longer, have any kind of intercourse. So it remains, manipulation by hands and other things, So that can happen.
You stress early treatment, and you also mentioned the pain going away in about 18 months. Is this something, I guess, in your experience, did it take 18 months to get treated? Were you readily prepared to talk about it to your healthcare provider or anyone? And what is this treatment that we should get early if we find ourselves dealing with Peyronie's?
Sure. I mean, for me, I was ready to go in quickly. I saw a doctor within 2 months of discovering I had this problem. And I only waited that long because it was insurance issue. I was clearing up a health insurance thing. But within 2 months, and then I was treated for about a year. So for me, it was 14 months. But the doctor mentioned it could go up to 18 months. You have what is called the acute phase at first, and that's when this inflammation process is happening and the scar tissue is laying itself down and getting worse. And that's really the most painful part. And my doctor told me, and I found this to be true. He said, in almost all Peyronie sufferers, the pain goes away after 18 months, but afterwards you are left with the scar tissue. For me, the treatment was first they do an erection assessment, and they check to see if you actually have Peyronie's disease, and that's pretty quick because they do it quickly with ultrasound. And that was diagnosed very quickly with me. And then, but the treatments for me were a mixture of verapamil and saline solution. Verapamil is an off-label blood pressure medication for this treatment, and it's mixed with saline solution. And they go under your skin, and they go in there. Your penis is numbed with lidocaine, and then they go in there with the needle, a small gauge needle, and they break up the scar tissue using that needle with the verapamil and the saline. And like I like to say, they're turning cheddar cheese into Swiss cheese, and that's the so you don't get rid of the scar tissue, but what you're doing is, instead of it being a solid block, you're trying to turn it into sort of a wide open net, so that when you become erect, the scar tissue will move and open just like it should in that area. Now that was I was a few years ago that I was treated. The protocol has changed. Not across the board, but verapamil. What I went through is these treatments were good in the early stage, but now there's a drug called, and I don't know if it's Xiaflex or Xiaflex, but it's XIA Flex, and that is more what doctors are using now. However, it seems that you have to wait later to get treated with that drug because it works more on softening the scar tissue when the scar tissue has already become calcified. So it seems to me right now, if you go in early, the best thing to do is you get verapamil treatments, and if you wait too long, then you either get the Xiaflex or Xiaflex treatments for later on. I know people who have done both. I know men. I talk to a lot of men who have Peyronie's disease or have had Peyronie's disease or who are still dealing, or starting to deal with it right now. And it depends on how long they wait, but I think doctors are waiting these days more to head toward the Xiaflex. It's FDA approved, and that seems to be the protocol these days. Truth is, most men do wait a long time. I went in early, but a lot of men are kind of freaked out, and they wait a long time. They wait too long anyway for really early treatment, so they end up getting this later treatment anyway, is how it goes. So, but that's now. Some doctors do nothing. Some urologists, if you present this, they will say, "I just wait and see," But the doctor I saw in New York was definitely in the camp of treat early and often, and that really did help me.
Now, you've written a book, Bent But Not Broken. The title, obviously, it's an appropriate title. Talk briefly about how this book helps or helped you to deal with any psychological issues that you may have been having because of your condition. And is that the goal in the book, to help other people deal in the same way that you did, or to offer suggestions on how to find their own path?
Sure. Yeah, no, I wrote the book originally. I was originally not going to write a memoir. I was originally going to write about a 40-page monograph, like for an Amazon single, where you just describe the symptoms, what you need to do to take care of yourself, and what you can expect for an outcome. So my original intention was to help other people, almost like a public service announcement. And I just would have put that digitally online, and people would have just downloaded it, and that was my original intention. But I am in a writing group, and as I mentioned, of course, earlier, I am a writer. And in my writing group, what people found very compelling were the psychological issues that came up between me and my partner of many years, the psychological issues I had about just relating to my own, sexual self. So it really ended up being a double-edged thing that happened. Was the relief of focusing on helping others and taking the attention off myself was very helpful, so that which made me feel less alone ultimately, but also whenever you help someone else, you just feel better. And then of course I did have to work through some of my psychological issues around this problem, and really where it headed toward was acceptance. I in the end, I had a very good outcome from my treatments, but in the end, my penis is different than it was to begin with. There's no question. It's shaped slightly differently. It functions slightly differently. I now, not always, but sometimes I'll take 10 milligrams of Viagra during sex to make sure everything's working fully. So the book in the end, hopefully will help others. I mean, I know others are reading it, and they do seem to be getting a lot out of it, and people seem to be men seem to be very happy that I've written it, and also women, of partners who have this problem, they're very happy I've written it. And it seems to be helping others, and it certainly helped me to write it.
Well, in wrapping up, Don, where can our listeners get a copy of your book and learn more about you and Peyronie's disease?
Sure. You can go to my website, www.doncummings.net, DONCUMMINGS, doncummings.net. And right at the top of that website there are all the places you can purchase the book. I recommend people try to buy the book locally, as close to possible at a bookstore. You can order it from your local bookstore on my site. There's a link that shows you how to do it really quickly. And, of course, it's also on Amazon, and it's also at Barnes & Noble. But if you go to doncummings.net, you can see the different ways to buy the book, and also there's a big old bio there, and there's all the reviews and the other interviews, and it's all there on a very simple single scroll website.
Don, been a pleasure. Thank you for joining us on the program, especially at this hour of the morning. Well, I guess everybody's up and about on a Monday, so we're right there with you. Thanks for joining us on the program, man.
I really appreciate it. I sure will. Thanks for having me. Okay.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. Transcripts and audio of this program are available at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au. And be sure and visit our affiliates page when you visit our platform at hpr.fm and healthprofessionalradio.com.au.
Thank you for listening to Health Professional Radio. We're very proud to be an independent broadcaster providing our content free of charge to you, the listener. One of the ways that we're able to remain free and independent is by having people like you become patrons. You can support Health Professional Radio simply by visiting hpr.fm and clicking the button that says Become a Patron. Your patronage of even just $1 a month lets us know that you're there, which in turn makes us more valuable to advertisers. And, of course, if you're able to afford more, then we would certainly appreciate the support. My name is Toby Longhurst from Health Professional Radio. Please visit hpr.fm, click the Become a Patron button, and support us if you can.